Imaginary Friend. Written by Bolding. Chapter 4. Day 6. A bit jumpy. There are two things I learned that night. One was that Pinky is easy to excite. Now I know that I've had experience before, but not like this. If Pinky had been an entity of this world, poor Gibble's room would be trashed. At the mention of this Celestia, her eyes widened and I'm pretty sure her lungs popped from how much air she took in from that gasp. Which brings me to the second thing I learned. Gibble does not like noise, especially high-pitched, excited squeals from a certain pink pony. The instant Pinky went into her frenzy, Gibble's mood went from slightly grumpy to downright infuriated. I was rushed out of the house as Pinky continued to wreak havoc in the old man's apartment. Honestly, I still don't see why I was the one who needed to be thrown out, but it was probably best to do what the geezer wanted if I wanted to learn more about this problem. Everything was normal from that point on. I went to the pharmacy to get something for my hangover and sat at home watching episodes of Breaking Bad that have been on my DVR for the past month. When nighttime came around, I laid in my bed, looking up the same ceiling that I saw every night, thinking the same things I always thought, and finally passed out. When I woke up in the morning, my headache was gone, the dryness in my mouth was no longer there, and I felt like I did every other morning where I didn't drink my liver into a coma. The walk to the bakery was like usual. Early morning people and ponies were out and about, performing their morning routines, looking completely exhausted. I couldn't blame them. No one wants to be up early in the morning. "Morning, Vinny," piped a certain pink abomination as I entered the bakery. She had her signature smile stretched across her face, stretching from ear to ear. Pinky could be annoying sometimes, but one look at that smile will get one to creep onto your face before you know it. "Morning," I grunted, taking off my coat and hat. Pinky hopped over to me, extending her forelegs for a hug. "Pinky, that won't work. I can't physically touch you," I reminded her. Instead of using common sense and agreeing with me, she shot me a dirty glare and pouted, crossing her forelegs like a spoiled child. "It's the thought that counts," she growled, turning her head away in frustration. I couldn't help but to laugh at her expense. Kneeling down to her level, I spread out my arms and wrapped them around her. Her ego smile returned as she followed in suit. My arms went straight through her, sending an eerie chill down my spine. It felt so strange, like jumping into a pool filled with cotton balls strange. Pinky's smile didn't fade, but I could tell she was a bit upset that she couldn't feel the hug. The smile didn't mean squat when her eyes screamed of desire. The hair on the back of my neck prickled as the front door's bell rang, signaling a customer. "Sorry, we're not open yet." I stopped my statement as I met eye to eye with Mr. Alpha. He stared at me with a furrowed brow, trying to grasp the scene before him. "Vinny, what are you doing?" I looked over to Pinky, then back to Mr. Alpha. "There was something on the floor," I said with a nervous laugh. "I was just picking it up." "Where is it now?" I'm pretty sure my heart stopped right there. Swallowing hard, I dug into my pockets, looking for anything that could be classified as evidence to show the man. Of course, the only thing in my pocket was my cell phone and wallet, and the one time I wanted there to be some lint, there wasn't. Cursing under my breath, I shrugged and looked down at the floor. "You got me, Mr. Alpha." The chubby man moved forward and placed one of his heavy hands on my shoulder. His face showed genuine concern as he let out an exasperated sigh. "Vinny, I know you have a lot on your plate. If something's wrong, don't be afraid to tell me. I can help you." Looking up at him, I felt that I needed to tell him everything. About Gibble, about my problem, about Pinky. If I got it all off my chest, maybe he would understand that I might have a chance of not being sent off to the loony bin. Swallowing hard, I took a deep breath and mentally prepared myself. "I threw the trash over there." His head did a take back as I pointed to the small gap between the counter and the wall. He looked back at me, completely bewildered. "Beg your pardon?" "I haven't had the will to clean up lately, being a baker and all, so I've kind of been slacking on my porter duties. I just didn't want to disappoint you." Mr. Alpha shook his head again as if he was trying to reconfigure his brain. Taking his hand off my shoulder, he let out a distraught sigh and rolled his eyes. "There's no need to get all high-strung about it, Vincent. I don't want you overworking yourself. How about I put out an ad for the paper to get some help around here?" I felt a bit bad for lying, but I just couldn't tell him about it. It would sound crazy. It is crazy. "Well, I'd say yes, but are we really in the position to hire more people? I mean, Money is tight. Mr. Ofa raised his hand and put on a sinister grin. Tension filled the air as his smile began to scare me. Last time he gave me a smile like this, we had the local mafia knocking at a store window with a brick. Since I appointed you as the new baker, our numbers have gone up dramatically. We even have enough for rent even. So as long as you keep baking like you do, we'll be fine with an extra pair of hands. Even though I was more than happy to help Mr. Ofa out, I didn't really like this plan. What if something happened to me and I wasn't able to work for him anymore? His business would sink like a rock if he depended on me alone. But Bossman gets what Bossman wants. I just nodded my head, grabbed a dustpan and hand broom, and cleaned up as much dust as possible from the gap as possible to make my white lie seem like truth. Mr. Ofa didn't even bother to see if there was any there or not. He just went off to his office to do God knows what for the next 8 hours. As I entered the kitchen, the smell of flour and baked goods consumed my nose. My skin tingled as I readied myself to start the bread for the day.
Ready to start the day, Vinny?
Pinky asked, her pearly white shining from under her huge smile. I nodded and threw on my apron. Dumping a bag of flour into the mixer, I prepared all the ingredients according to how Pinky taught me. Her method did not disappoint. Not only did it produce an edible loaf of bread, but it actually tasted good, too. While I waited for the mixer to do its work, I turned to Pinky, who sat next to me humming a cheery tune. Hey, Pinks, mind if I ask you a few questions? I've been curious about your world and how it works. Pinky cut her song short before cracking a devilish grin.
Sure, but you have to answer my questions I have about humans.
Deal. Grabbing a filter and some coffee grounds, I began making a cup of coffee for myself. So, what's with the tattoo in your butt? I asked, and Pinky turned her head to look at her flank before giggling.
That's not a tattoo, silly. That's my cutie mark.
I gave her a confused look, and which she quickly picked up on.
Our cutie marks appear on our flanks when we discover our super-duper special talent.
I watched the coffee pot start filling up with bitter black liquid before moving on to the next question. Who's this Celestia that you got all excited about yesterday? Pinky gave me a disgusted look, like I met her grandmother behind a 7-Eleven for a favor.
It's Princess Celestia. She's the only ruler of all of Equestria, and she promised to come down to Ponyville in 3 days to visit you and Gibble.
I couldn't help myself from chuckling. Ponyville. Is that seriously the name? My laughter was stopped short as my brain finally processed what she said. The ruler? Coming to visit? Pinky, when were you planning to tell me this? Why didn't you bother asking me first? I asked, a little concerned about this sudden event. The mare put a hoof on her chin and looked up to the sky, deep in thought before breaking out a smile.
I don't know.
I facepalmed so hard that I was pretty sure I gave myself a brain aneurysm. This pony was going to be the death of me. Next time you decide something important like that, can you, I don't know, maybe consult me next time? Pinky nodded her head wildly.
Okie dokie.
I let out a distraught sigh, opening the fridge to grab some cream for my coffee. As I poured the caffeine-infused drink into my cup, I asked one more question. I know nothing about you, Pinky. What's your story? Pinky's smile faded as the question escaped my lips, but I couldn't help to feel that I touched a bad nerve, so I raised my hand and shook my head. Forget it. We'll talk about it another time. Pinky nodded her head and her signature grin found its way back into her face. Grabbing the coffee pot and a mug, I poured my breakfast and added the necessary ingredients to make it just right. I guess that'll do for now. You got any questions? I asked before taking a sip.
Oh, yeah, I have one. What does 15 for a tuggy mean?
Coffee erupted from my mouth like an angry volcano. Her question completely threw me off. Where did you hear that from? I stammered, trying not to laugh. The mare pointed towards the street with her hoof.
Some human girl last night was asking a human boy who was sitting in midair last night. I assume sitting in midair. She met someone in their car. She didn't wear normal clothes like most girls do. Hers were too small on her.
I looked around the room, unable to make eye contact with Pinky. How was I supposed to explain to her what a prostitute was? She wanted a partner for tug of war for 15 minutes. That's it. I gave her the most forced smile I could muster. Her eyelids lowered and her brow furrowed. It was like she was searching deep into my eyes to ensure I wasn't lying. I could feel the sweat developing across my forehead and slowly fall down my face. Her glare dug deeper into my soul, almost as if she had some sort of superpower.
Okay, that makes sense.
Her elated expression appeared instantly as I let out a relieved sigh and wiped the sweat from my forehead.
I'll ask Dashy if she wants 15 for a tuggy later.
To this day, I hope that this Dashy character is as naive as her pink counterpart, because if not, that's going to be one awkward conversation. I looked at a few paper towels and cleaned up my little spit take before returning to the mixer. The dough was ready for baking, and just in time. There was only an hour left before the morning rush came in. Turning to Pinky, I pointed at my wrist to signal the time. The morning rush is coming in soon. As I peeked into the oven to check if the bread was its golden brown, one more question crept into my head. Hey, Pinky? The mare looked up from the ground and tilted her head at an engrossed puppy. Don't you have work or something to do throughout the day? Pinky nodded her head and smiled.
Yep.
Silence filled the room as I stood there staring at the mare, waiting for her to continue. She didn't. Shouldn't you go to it? Pinky nodded, but didn't move from her spot again. I waited for something to happen, only to be disappointed. With a shrug, I turned back to the oven and peeked again. The bread was ready, so I turned back to grab my necessary tools. Something was different, though. Pinky was missing. Pinky? I asked out loud, trying to find the pony. I looked around the kitchen trying to find her with no success. Pinky? Who's Pinky? My heart skipped as I turned the doorway to find Mr. Ofa standing in it. I didn't know what to do. My hands were shaking, my body refused to move, and my brain just went dead. Mr. Ofa raised an eyebrow and made his way towards me. He raised his hand and pressed it against my forehead. Vinny, are you alright? You haven't been your usual self since the day I made you the baker. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. I couldn't say or think of, for that matter, a word to get me out of this predicament. It was almost like the gods had chose me for their toys that day. The front door's bell rang, knocking some sense back into me. I'm fine, Mr. Ofa. Really, I am. I have to take care of the customers. I stuttered, sliding around the hefty man. With 2 left feet, I stumbled to the storefront and took my position behind the counter. The guy in his early 20s stood there, looking bored out of his mind. How can I help you? I asked, putting on a smile. The guy looked up at me with his glossy green eyes and pointed at the front window. A sign reading Help Wanted sat across it. I hadn't noticed it when I came out this morning, so Mr. Ofa must have put it up when I was making the bread. Mr. Ofa! I screamed, making the guy jump.
Hey, Vinny, I got something new to show you,
said a familiar voice, making me jump. Piggy stood beside me with her mouth slightly open, almost as if she was having something in her mouth. The guy's eyes shot to Pinky's position, then back to me. It was almost as if... Are you here for the porter position? We both jumped as Mr. Ofa came in from behind and extended his hand to the young man. The guy nodded, not uttering a word, and shook his hand. Mr. Ofa smiled and guided him into the office. I have some time, so let's have a quick interview, yes? The two made their way to the office, slamming the door behind them. Turning back to Pinky, I looked down to the ground where she placed something.
Isn't it cool?
She exclaimed. I stood there for a moment, trying to see what she was talking about before remembering something. I couldn't. I don't know. I can't see it. I replied with a monotonous tone. I had more pressing matters on my mind. Like that guy's reaction to Pinky. There we go. Another fantastic chapter. What else is fantastic on my wonderful Patreons? Thank you to my Tier 1 Patreons Squall, Windfeather, Rainflicker, Starlight Blaze, Dreamless Portal, Nine Tiny Equine, and Stu Hex. My Tier 2 Patreons Chase LeMaster, Sword Brother and Morded, Solus, RD Bryant, Captain Blue Shadow, HKH4 aka Texture, and the Animated Ghost. And of course a large thank you to Silent Titan. I appreciate your guys' support so much and it means a ton to me. If you want other ways to support me, well, your viewership is more than enough. However, of course, leaving a like, commenting, and of course subscribing does help the channel a lot, and I appreciate it a ton. That aside, however, this has been Firehearth. Have a wonderful day.